Hi everyone, happy Monday and welcome back to Where the Red Fern Grows Read Aloud. Today we are in chapter 6. Keep in mind we started this read aloud last week on Monday, and every day we've been reading a chapter. Each chapter is filled with more exciting information, and it has me, I hope it has you as well, quite excited for what the next chapter holds. We are going to do a brief recap of all the chapters up until the one we are today, and then we'll see what chapter 6 has in store for us. So this book started out with Billy flashbacking to his boyhood days because of an injured hound. We now know why that happened, because Billy has hounds when he was a little boy. We know that Mama and Papa did not want these it's not that they didn't want the hounds, they couldn't afford the hounds. Billy came to them wanting not one hound, but 2 hounds, but his parents felt really bad because they just couldn't afford it at the time. So Billy did not give up. He stayed persistent, he stayed determined, and he ended up saving up $50 for these hounds in 2 years, okay? He went to Grandpa, who owns a store. Grandpa went ahead and contacted the kennel in Kentucky, and the dogs were still available. So Billy has just left the town. He's on his way back home to the Ozark Mountains in Oklahoma with his new dogs. Chapter 5, though, he stopped overnight because he couldn't make the trip in one day. So he rested on his way, and through the night, in the middle of the night, he came in contact with a mountain lion. Okay, that's the last thing we've read in chapter 5. I'm going to read the last paragraph in chapter 5 just to have our memories there regarding that chapter, and then we're going to jump into chapter 6, okay? It says, "The lion prowled around us, screaming and growling, first on the right, then on the left, and above and below. In the wee hours of the morning, he gave up and left to stalk other parts of the mountains. I'm sure he thought he didn't stand a chance against the vicious hound and a big hunter." He is talking about his 2 dogs, the boy dog and the girl dog. Keep in mind they don't have any names yet. And of course himself, the big hunter, okay? So we are jumping into chapter 6 today to see what it holds for us. Here we go. Chapter 6. After the terrifying night, the bright morning sun was a welcome sight. I fixed breakfast and soon we were on our way. I tried to get the puppies to follow me so as to lighten my load. After they would for a way, and then sitting on their rears, they would cry and whimper. Back in the sack they would go with their heads sticking out of the holes and their long ears flopping. I moved on. About midday, I entered country. I knew I wasn't far from home. I dropped down on the mountains into the bottom, far above the place I had crossed the river on my way to town. Staying on the left of the river, I followed its course past several campgrounds, but didn't stop until I came to the one where I found the magazine. Here, I took the pups out of the sack and sat down in the warm sand. As the afternoon wore on, I sat there deep in thought. I was trying to think what I was going to tell my mother and father. Keep in mind, he has not told his mother and father that he has these hounds or he bought these hounds. I could think of nothing. Finally, I decided I would just tell them the truth. And with the help of the new overalls, clothes, and candy, I would weather the storm. The pups were having a big time playing. With their little front paws locked around each other. They were growling, rolling, and chewing on one another. They looked so cute, and I laughed out loud. While I was watching the rompering, a thought came. I haven't named them. I went over the list of names. For him, I tried Red, Bugle, Lead, name after name as before. For her, I tried Susie, Marble, Queen, all kinds of girl names. Nothing seemed to fit. Still mumbling names over and over, I glanced up. There, carved in the white bark of the sycamore tree, was a large heart. In the center of the heart were 2 names, Dan and Ann. The name Dan was a little larger than Anne. It was wide and bold. The scars stood out more. The name Anne was small and neat and even. I stared unbelievingly, for there were my names. They were perfect. I walked over and picked up the pups. Looking at him, I said, "Your name is Dan. I'll call you Old Dan." Looking at her, I said, "Your name is Little Anne. Your name, little girl, your name, little girl, is Anne. I'll call you Little Anne." It was then I realized it was all too perfect. Here in the fisherman's camp, I found the magazines and the ad. I looked over at the old sycamore log. There, I asked God to help me for the 2 hound pups. There were the 2 pups rolling and playing in the warm sand. I thought of the old Casey baking powder can and the fishermen, how freely they had given their nickels and dimes. I looked up again at the names carved in the tree. Yes, it was all there, like a large puzzle. Piece by piece, each piece fit perfectly until the puzzle was complete. It could have not happened without the help of the unseen power. I stayed at the campground until dark. I knew I had to go home, but I put it off as long as I could. The crying of the pups telling me they were hungry made my mind for me. I knew the time had come for me to face my mother and father. I sacked up my dogs and waded the river. As I came out of the bottom, I could see the lamplight glow from the windows of our house. One of the small yellow squares darkened for an instant. Someone had walked across the floor. I wonder who it was. I heard Daisy, our milk cow, moo. I was thinking so hard of what I could say. It startled me for a second. Reaching the gate of our house, I stopped. I never thought our home very pretty, but the night it looked different. It looked clean and neat and peaceful, nestled in the foothills of the Ozark. Yes, that night I was proud of our home. My bare feet made no noise as I crossed the porch. With my free hand, I reached and pulled the leather that worked the latch. Slowly, the door swung inward. I couldn't see my father or sisters. They were too far to the right of me, but my mother was directly in front of the door, sitting in her old cane-bottom rocker, knitting. She looked up. I saw all the worry and grief leave her eyes. Her head bowed down. The knitting in her hands came up to cover her face. I stepped inside the room. I wanted to run to her and comfort her, to tell her how sorry I was for all the worry and grief I had caused her. The booming voice of my father shook me from my trance. He said, "Well, what have you got there?" Laughing, he got up from his chair and came over to me. He reached and took the sack from my shoulder. When he started looking for it, he said, "I went to the store and your grandpa told me all about it. It wasn't too hard to figure out what you had done, but you should have told us." I ran to my mother and dropping to my knees, I buried my face in her lap. And Mama patted my head. I heard her say in the quivering voice, "Oh, why didn't you tell us? Why?" I couldn't answer. Between sobs, I heard squeals of delight from my sisters as they fondled my pups. I heard my father say, "What's this other stuff you got?" Without raising my head from my mother's lap, in a choking voice, I said, "One is for you, one is for Mama, and the other is for the girls." I heard the snapping of strings as a rattle and the rattle of paper, and oh and ahs from my sister were wonderful to hear. Papa came over to Mama, laying the cloth on the arm of her chair. He said, "Well, you've been wanting a new dress. Here's enough cloth to make half a dozen dresses." Realizing that everything was forgotten, I stood up and dried my eyes. Papa was pleased with his new overalls. My sisters forgot the pups for the candy. The light that was shining from my mother's eyes as she fingered the cheap cotton cloth was something I would never forget. Mama warmed some milk for the pups. They drank until their little tummies were tight and round. As I ate, Papa sat down at the table and started talking man talk to me. He asked, "How are things in town?" I told him it was boiling with people. The wagon yard was full of wagons and teams. He asked if I had seen anyone I knew. I told him I hadn't, but the station master had asked about him. He told me where I spent the night. He asked me where I spent the night. I told him about the cave in the Sparrow Hawk Mountains. He said that he said that must have been the one called Robber's Cave. My younger sister piled up. Did you stay all night with the robbers? My older sister said, silly, that was a long time ago. There aren't any robbers there now. The other one had her nickels worth in. Weren't you scared? No, I said. I wasn't scared of staying in the cave, but I heard a mountain lion scream, and it screamed me half to death. Aw, they won't bother you, Papa said. You had a fire, didn't you? I said, yes. He said, they'll never bother you unless you are wounded or cornered. But if you are, you had better look out. Papa asked me how I liked town. I said I didn't like it at all and wouldn't live there even if he gave it to me. With a querying look on his face, he said, I'm afraid I don't understand. I thought you always wanted to go to town. I did, I said, but I don't anymore. I don't like the people there and I couldn't understand them. What's wrong with them? He asked. I told him how they stared at me and they even laughed and made fun of me. He said, I don't think they were making fun of you, were they? Yes, they were, I said. And to beat it all, the boys jumped on me and knocked me down in the dirt. If it hadn't been for the marshal, I would have taken a beating. Papa said, so you met the marshal? What did you think of him? I told him he was a nice man. He had bought me a bottle of soda pop. At the mention of soda pop, the blue eyes of my sister's eyes widened. They started firing questions at me, wanting to know what color it was and what it tasted like. I told them it was strawberry and it was bubbled and tickled when I drank it, and it made me burp. The eager questions of my three little sisters had an effect on my father and mother. Papa said, Billy, I don't want you to feel badly about the people from town. I don't think they were poking fun at you. Anyway, not like you think they were. Maybe they weren't, I said, but I still don't want to ever live in a town. It's too crowded, and you couldn't get a breath of fresh air. In a sober voice, my father said, someday you may have to live in town. Your mother and I don't intend to live in these hills all our lives. It's no place to raise a family. A man's children should have an education. They should get out and see the world, meet people. I don't see why we have to move to town to get an education, I said. Hasn't Mama taught us how to read and write? There's more to an education than just reading and writing, Papa said, much more. I asked him when he thought we'd be moving to town. Well, it'll be some time yet, he said. We don't have the money now, but I'm hoping someday we will. From the stove where she was heating salt water for my feet, Mama said in a low voice, I'll pray every day and night for that day to come. I don't want you children to grow up without an education, not even knowing what a bottle of soda pop is, or even seeing the inside of a schoolhouse. I don't think I could stand that. I'll just keep praying for someday the good Lord may answer my prayers. I told my mother that I seen the schoolhouse in town. Again, I had to answer 1,000 questions from my sisters. I told them it was made of red brick and it was bigger than Grandpa's store, a lot bigger. There must have been at least 1,000 kids going into the schoolhouse. I told all about the teeter-totters, the swings made out of log chains, and funny-looking pipes that ran up the side of the building and how I climbed up in it and slid out like the other kids. I didn't tell them how I came out. I think that was a fire escape, Papa said. Fire escape, I said. It looked like a slide to me. Did you notice where it made the bend up at the top, he said? He asked. I nodded my head. Well, inside the school there's a door, he said. If the school gets on fire, they open the door. The children jump in the pipe and slide out to safety. Boy, that's a keen way of getting out of a fire, I said. Well, it's getting late, Papa said. We'll talk about this some other time. We better get to bed as we have a lot of work to do tomorrow. My pups were put in the corn crib for the night. I covered them with shucks and kisses and kissed them goodnight. The next day was a busy one for me. With the hampering help of my sisters, I made the little dog house. Papa cut the ends off of check lines and gave them to me for collars. With painstaking care, deep in the tough collar leather, I scraped the name Old Dan on one and Little Ann on the other. With the nail and the rock, two holes were punched in each end of the straps. I put them around their small necks and laced the ends together with baling wire. In the evening, I had a talk with my mother. I told her about praying for the two pups, about the magazine, and the plan I had. I told her how hard I had tried to find names for them and how strange it was finding them carved in the bark of the sycamore trees. With a smile on her face, she asked, "Do you believe God heard your prayers and helped you?" "Yes, Mama," I said. "I know He did, and I'll always be thankful." And that is the end of chapter 6. Tomorrow we'll read chapter 7. So with a great relief, Mama and Papa were not upset, but they were a little worried because, of course, Billy had to travel over a day, so they weren't quite sure if he was okay. You could see that, you could visualize that with the words that showed Mama's expression. So overall, they were not upset with him, just grateful that he was back safely. They welcomed the pups warmly, and so I am looking forward to what chapter 7 has for us tomorrow. Keep in mind that every time you view our chapter read-alouds, leave a comment on something that you thought was interesting about the chapter, or questions or wonderings that you have, just so I know that you viewed it. Any questions you may have for me, let me know, and I will see y'all tomorrow. Bye.